We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Taste with you well, you've gone sour. You want the world plus everything, but it won't work an hour. And now your questions are guilt creeping, and you're going buying flowers. You throw away the dreams we had, boy. I won't allow it. I said we're gonna fall out. Let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out. So shut your mouth.
Good morning. Welcome to NUFC Matters, the professionals. Me and Mitch are here this morning. Stu might join us, actually. He's in the green room. He's taking a call at the moment, so we might bring him in. We might not. He's had a little bit of bad news this morning, so fingers crossed. He might be able to join us this morning. But we're only going to do an hour. I've got to go out at 12, but wow. Newcastle, always plenty to talk about, Mitch, and 2-0 defeat. It wasn't really unexpected. Even the dice predicted a 3-1 win for Man City. But yeah, I mean, look, I put a tweet out last night. It's had a lot of traction. It was a measured tweet. I believe the season's over. I genuinely can't see us qualifying for Europe, especially if there's more injuries to add to what we've already got. You know, the fact that Botman went off, Gordon went off, didn't look comfortable, wasn't himself yesterday. Obviously, we've got a couple of weeks before the next game, you know, international break. That could throw up more injuries, who knows? But, you know, that's it now. No chance of lifting a trophy again this season. Europe isn't out the question. They need to put a good run together in the last 10 games. They need some results to go their way, but it's not out the question. But in all intents and purposes, for me, it just has that feeling that now it is over. Next season is what we're looking at, and we shouldn't have really. You know, I didn't genuinely think we'd get through yesterday. I'd be over the moon if we got the penalties, if we'd chucked loads of people behind the ball, but we didn't. And you know, we're out, and that's it. You know, the trophyless run goes on. And I think there's just a bit of realism there, but there's a bit of disappointment as well, Mitch. And you know, I think I'm still coming to terms with it, and I will over the course of the week, that, you know, at least we're not in a relegation battle. Got to be thankful for that. But you know, I'm disappointed, like all Newcastle fans this morning.
It's difficult to sort of put more into, or try and look for the positives out of yesterday. It wasn't a shellacking. It could have been. Two defected goals again. But I think that's the nature of how we were playing. You see how we were set up. It was a true back five. You know, when was conceded that first goal, if you look at the positions when the attack's forming, we've got 5 across the 18-yard box and 3 yards ahead of them. And out of all of that, they were unable to press and close down and stop the shot coming in. And when the shot did come in, it took the deflection and loop over the top with Dubravka. There was sort of almost a fatalistic feel about last night. Lots of optimism pre-match. Certainly over here in Dubai, you put the videos up. We had a full house again. Place was bouncing. A little bit of expectation, and then what was delivered on the pitch just was mediocre, and you're not going to do anything about mediocre. And I'm left with, again, more and more questions about Murphy at right back, Byrne at left back. Yes, change the formation, and yes, we were limited again with players missing through injury. That just feels and sounds like a broken record excuse. We went out with a whimper, really. With, you know, the possession statistics show it was if it had been a boxing match, it would have gone to points, but it would have been a very, very big points defeat.
Hi, Stu.
Thanks
for popping on, mate. I hope everything's, you know, as good as it can be. Good stuff. Yeah, look, we didn't expect to win yesterday. I don't think many people that asked for it predicted a win. We all hope maybe we could get the penalties and it would be the look of the draw. But what did you make of the game? You were down there yesterday.
Yeah, I went. I think like everyone else who did go, they travelled with hope rather than expectation. But sometimes I'd like my expectations to be surpassed, you know, and really they didn't lay a glove on them, and it's as if they were in awe. And there was opportunities where we could have attacked. Now, we can all criticise the formation, the people in the formation. Personally, I would have, with a 3 or 5-3-2, I would have had Kraft and Hall as the wing backs. And Man City will pass you to death, and we needed mobility in midfield. And for me, that's where I would have started Anderson to go with Willock and Bruno. But it is what it is. We didn't expect to get beat, and now the lads are across to Dubai. And the last couple of times I've had these winter breaks, they've come back refreshed, reinvigorated, and started hitting the ground running. So going back to what I said initially, I don't think anyone expected us to go there and win as much as we'd like them to. So I can't understand the meltdown people are having because we've got beat off Manchester City. And we do have a depleted squad, whether it's an excuse or not, it's a fact. So it was brilliant being there with the supporters. And yes, it's a tried and tested thing where people like to praise the support and how wonderful they were. But I think Newcastle's fans over the years have built up an inbuilt resilience where they go there not expecting to win anything, and anything on top of that's a bonus. And we are proud of what the team has achieved. I mean, if we break it down, what they've done since Eddie Howe's taken over, you know, there's a lot more high spots than low spots. And getting beat off the world champions is really not a low spot to me. It would be nice to get through, of course, to get to Wembley. But we are being hampered by things beyond our control at the moment. And for all the players are giving their best, it's quite clear now that they're not good enough to get to where we want them to be. I'm sure where the management team want to be, and for certain where the owners want them to be. So I think this summer's going to be huge for the club. And taking it away, Man City actually showed us what we aspire to be. And in all honesty, I think just 3 or 4 different positions being changed, we can compete with them. But it's to do it on a long-term basis is going to be a bit more difficult with the constraints at the moment. But all in all, yeah, disappointed we weren't out. But as I said, most people expected it.
Lewis Hall looked good when he came on yesterday, Mitch. You know, I mean, it was a surprise to see him coming on. I mean, I remember Steve Hasty in our WhatsApp group saying this was like he's chucking it. What did he say again? The way that he expressed it when he brought the 4 subs on, it was like hiring his toys out the pram to an extent. This is it. Let's put the 4 subs on. You know, we can't do any worse. But they actually made a big difference.
Yes, and again, it makes you wonder why not drop them in from the start. I think one of the few highlights was seeing a decent performance out of him, but then in doing that, Eddie's made a rod for his own back if he doesn't pick him again, based on the back of the results and everything. There was a couple of things out yesterday that I'm still scratching my head at. The referee, somebody's just made that point. Don't want to sound whinging about referees, but I can see why Lewis Dunk got sent off for calling him a bad word, because I would have been calling him a bad word or two yesterday. The booking for Shaw was an outrageous booking. You know, they clearly played the ball, very clearly. He seemed weak, and he seemed influenced by the City players throughout the game. One thing I found interesting with our goals, because of the position we're in, because our defence is under pressure, I don't know if they're 100% confident with Dubravka behind them compared to Pope. But if you look at the difference between the 2 goals we conceded and the save that their keeper made from Isaac's volley, the difference was the defender in front of Isaac had the discipline to hold his position and not stick a leg or a head out. He trusted the keeper to make the save. Whereas both of our goals came from, firstly, Burns sticking a leg out, and secondly, Botman trying to get his head onto something that was actually going probably wide. And I think there's the difference when you see a composed defence that's playing well and confident versus a defence that's underconfident, and they'll chuck their bodies at anything to try and stop it. But actually, it was the way they defended so deep, they invited those opportunities. And so it becomes a bit self-fulfilling that if we're going to let them take that space, if we're going to line up so deep and not challenge and close down early, we're going to get goals like that conceded because we're making challenges too late at the last moment. Found it very frustrating. Very frustrating. I think if you compare the 2 seasons, there's been a lot of histrionics on social media. There's one report by a journalist who's a Newcastle fan, allegedly. If you read that article today, you've got to ask questions. Comparing with to saying how far we haven't really gone that further forward to Tyne under Bruce. What I would say is swap the 2 seasons around. If this was last season, and then last season was this, we'll be talking about steady, fantastic progress. And instead, what we've seen is a drop-off from a season in which we overachieved with what we had. And we've had some quite unusual circumstances to deal with that I don't think would happen again. And I think that helps me sit back and sort of try and take a little bit of solace. The article I referred to, Simon Bird, who shows once again that politically he can't help but mention connections to Saudi and human rights, and on the back of a defeat and being, there's just no need. There's no need for that at this time. Yet you can't help yourself. And so now I think we're starting to see a few true colours. That he uses that tweet in the press conference pre-game from an account who, well, like I said to you the other night, I'm blocked by it. And that should tell a lot of people everything. Because people who tend to block me know I can call that bullshit out. And I'm not frightened to. And I think using all of that in press conferences with Eddie's poor. There's things that need addressing, 100%. Everybody can see that. My major concern is the relative silence from the Saudi side of the ownership group, really since Christmas. Not doing anything, making a decision not to invest in January. I'd like to know whose decision that was and what the thinking was behind it, and was it more about being FFP? It was obvious we needed some sort of help up front and some sort of help in midfield, and I'm sure there could have been ways to do deals, and I'd like to know who decided not to do those deals and why. And that still leaves questions now, that now some people who want to make mischief are making hay with the mischief. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help as a fan base because it's making people jumpy. Some of the reactions last night, I'm glad I stayed in the pub for a few hours and had a drink with a few of the lads and lass from the supporters club, rather than sit and come home in a huff and scan social media and get myself wound up. But looking back at it this morning over the sausage sarnie and a cup of coffee, I was quite disappointed, but not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, the substitutions, Stu, I mean, Lewis Hall did come on, people saying they should be given more of a chance now in the last 10 games of the season to help them bed in. There was a notable change with the 4 substitutions that came on. It added pace, but added a bit of youth as well. Lewis Miley, Almiron, Hall. It was a breath of fresh air. There was a change.
Sorry, I'm saying they give energy, they give enthusiasm, and for me, it showed they had a point to prove, and that there is unity in the squad, because they could have come on and said, "Well, I don't care." But Miley looked better for his rest. I thought Anderson was up for it and was probing. But the game was gone, to be fair, and I'm pretty sure if we did get one, we might have rattled them and got another one, but more than likely they would have stepped up a bit. But I thought the defence handled Haaland really well, who sulked and cheated. A lot of them did. They did what they call professional fouls a lot. When we were breaking, they would get free kicks, but there should be yellow cards, and they weren't giving them. And on the train on the way back, there was a big gripe about we had the ball. I think it was Willock going down the wing, and the linesman flagged it for being out, and it wasn't, unless the TV showed differently. But from where I was sitting, it wasn't, or standing as it was. But then about 30 seconds later, they had a ball that was out, and it was allowed in. So it's all this favouritism that goes to what are deemed to be the bigger clubs. But one thing I was really disappointed with yesterday was Manchester City support. And I was questioning, I hope we don't become like that, where it's like they were just sitting there like some Roman emperor, please, like, entertain me, and just sitting back waiting for things to happen. And you've got like nearly 8,000 Newcastle fans going daft, just back in the team. So it was a glimpse into the future on the pitch that was admirable and something that we wanted, but off the pitch, it was something I really hope we don't become. So that's something that I would imagine Mr. Silverstone and Eels will have to look at, and how do you retain the proper support that are in the stands and have the success that they've got on the pitch. And that's the balancing act that at the moment they seem to be struggling with. And I'm 100% with Mitch. There was room, and I'm sure there was room to make an addition. Even one pair of fresh legs could have made a difference to that squad in January, especially when we're relying on Miley game after game after game. Longstaff, who there's now saying has been injured or is playing with an injury, game after game after game. Bruno walking a tightrope. It just shows you the midfield was crying out for an addition, because we had Anderson injured, Willock was injured. It's all right saying they're going to come back, but I'm off the thought, still being positive, that we will finish in Europe. I think we're in a mini league, but we're at the moment, because of the game against Chelsea, we're now bottom of that. Well, second bottom if you include Chelsea. In that mini league, there's Chelsea, ourselves, West Ham, Wolves, Man United, Brighton, and we've got West Ham, Wolves. No, not Wolves. We've got West Ham, Brighton, Man United. We've got them all to play, haven't we? So it really is in our own hands. And I just want to repeat what I said earlier. I think this warm weather training will do the world of good, and they'll come back with a bit of bonding, I would imagine, and togetherness, and hopefully a desire, looking refreshed and ready to start proving points, because we said it last week that so many of the team had peaked, and they were never going to have a season as good as that, because they surpassed their limitations of them as footballers, but collectively they did it as a team. But we need better players now. Bruno needs better players around him. You could see yesterday he was frustrated, but he was still trying. And when you start adding like the Tonali's and Joe Linton's into that, he'll feel more relaxed, which means he can play better. And we all we can all be football managers, can't we? We'd all say this is who I'd pick, which I said at the start as it happens, and who we would sign. But I've got enough belief in Eddie Howe that he knows just as well as we do, just as well as anyone else watching the games, where we can improve. And I think there's a number of positions that need to be improved, but we can't do it all at once. So we do need to be patient with the process, and I still say trust the process, but we need to be patient with it until things change financially. Then that's where I expect in the summer we will see a lot of announcements to allow people off to spend the money. So to summarise all that, on the pitch it was everything we wanted to be. Looking at Man City, they controlled it the way, even the goalkeeper, he had the ball in the corner and then he cross-field pinged this ball, and they passed the ball blindly. They know where the other places were, where the other players were, without even having to look up. And there was a confidence that they oozed that we lacked. And then when we got the ball, it was like they were scared of making a mistake, which forced the mistakes. You know, there's like they didn't have the belief in each other. And it's, I suppose it can be mind-boggling, or not mind-boggling, it can do your head in when you know you're playing against a better team. You're already 1 down through a deflection, 2 down through a deflection. And if it wasn't for bad luck, we would have no luck. But that's how it is. You know, we've got to get through it and start believing in ourselves again. And that's why I think this break will be absolutely essential, and it'll be crucial to the running, which I think will come through with flying colours.
Okay, as always, a bit of positivity from Stu. John Askew, good morning. He says, morning, everyone. Lads, are there lessons Eddie can learn from this season? And if so, what are they? Mitch?
Plenty, I'm quite sure. You do sometimes learn more from mistakes and failure than you do from success. I'm sure there's moments he would look back on in games, could have done something differently, could have set us up different for that game, could I have made a change earlier, did I make the right changes? All of those things, I think, if you're not constantly learning and evolving in the game, when you're standing still, you end up going backwards. So I think there's quite a lot you can learn. He seems to have also become a far more astute with the press. And he learned to handle some of the curveballs and difficult things that will be chucked at him out of the blue. I still think it was very wrong of certain individuals to effectively initially make him the honorary spokesman on human rights in football for a period of time, and then he was being asked about this and asked about that. He's had the Tonali situation to deal with, and I think that if you can't grow out of that as a manager and a managerial group and the whole backroom staff with him, then there's probably something wrong. And there'll be times, I'm sure, you'll go through games and situations that you'll come across again in the future and probably think, all right, okay, I know what I did then and that didn't work. So plan B, what do we do here? I would personally like to have seen him experiment more with different formations when we've had some of the injury problems we've had. That's the one thing I used to go on and on and on about Bruce playing square pegs in round holes. It never works. Never seems to work. And yes, we've got quite a few players who he relies on to be versatile and be able to slot into different positions. Has he done enough of that this season? I don't know. But yeah, I'm quite sure there's plenty and then some that he'll take away from this season and think, right, this is how I'm going to do this different going forward. I think he's also learned what it really takes, and I think the whole squad have learned what it really takes to compete in Europe and on all 3 domestic fronts in terms of preparation, training, fitness, recovery, etc. And that's got to benefit everybody in the long run, provided that the owners are as determined to make we're number one and find every way around that they can to try and bridge the gap that the PSR rules really are keeping nicely apart. I personally think, as a fan base, we would get more out of now seeing somebody within the ownership group giving a little pushback to the Premier League and giving a little pushback to the situation that we've got, rather than thinking about what's going on the pitch. Because, I think a lot of people are very down about the fact that we're now not competing for any cups, and the league position, we're in a difficult position. But like Stu says, it's a mini league we're in. If we come back from this international break and refreshed and ready to go, we've got a good set of fixtures to get as high as possible in the table. We can't sit and say the league's over. And in terms of money, every position's worth about £1.2 million. So if we want to maximise our income, we've got to keep going. We've got to keep pressing. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
What can Eddie do to change things next season, Stu, do you think? And what lessons will he have learned?
Yeah, I think he knows already. He's a studious type of guy, and he's willing to learn on the job. He's not like other managers, even our previous manager, who thinks they know everything and can't be told anything. I think Howe's willing to learn, and he'll be loyal to the players, and he gets questioned for being too loyal, but he's been loyal to the group he's got at the moment. And he's shown with the Shelvies in the Woods, you've done your job, now move on. So if you look at the squad, and we go back to when the very first transfer window he had, there were players that were signed in that window that we knew were signed with the remit of helping us stay up, and then would be slowly phased out the team. And I'm thinking of people like Dan Byrne and Matt Target, etc. But with people like Byrne, he was exceptional last year, and he did surpass. Remember, he was a bit player for Brighton beforehand. We didn't sign someone from Barcelona or something like that. It was a squad player for Brighton that didn't play every game for them, but he came in and he did the job he was meant to do. Same with Target, etc. And then we started getting the Isaacs and Botmans, etc. that came in with it. There was a plan for 4, 5, 6 windows, and we've got at least another 2 to go. I think where we're sitting at after this time next year, after the summer and the January window, we'll see a much different squad to the one he inherited. And you can't make wholesale changes. You can't just say, right, get 20 out and bring 20 in. Like Chelsea, if you look at how they're so inconsistent. It is building and is making sure it's all right for us sitting on the sideline saying, get rid of that person, get rid of that person. The person's got to have someone bidding for them and then match the terms that they're on, etc. There's a lot of parts of the wheel rather than just say, yeah, get rid of him. But I'm sure if, as Mitch mentioned just there, that we could push back against the Premier League, not even with letters or emails or publicly shame them, but they could challenge them in a different way by selling certain players to Saudi Arabia and saying, well, that's what we think that player's worth. Question it. He has a sponsorship. We believe that is fair market value because of the impact it'll have in the Middle East. Challenge it. You know what I mean? And then you'll see how they back down to Manchester City and their fancy lawyers. Well, their fancy lawyers get taught lessons from our lawyers. So it becomes a bigger game. But with Eddie Howe, I think he knows. I'm more than sure he knows. He's very pragmatic in his answers, but you could see he cares. And if you've got a manager that cares and a manager that is willing to learn and has the respect from his squad, I think this window will give him the chance to show, especially with Dan Ashworth out the way. You should have more say in the transfers and say, right, this is the area I need to target. These are the people I'd like to get. It's not his job to sit and do negotiations and salaries and bonuses and stuff like that. But you could put them in front of him and explain to them why why Eddie Howe wants that player to sign for him. And that would help us a lot more. Similar to what Keegan did. Keegan get people to sign for Newcastle when no one wanted to come, or they were led to believe from the press that they didn't want to come. So I'm fully behind Eddie Howe, and I'm really expecting them to finish the season well, and then it'll all blow away. Getting rid of Manchester City is not the problem. It was the performance did they play within themselves? I think both teams did, to be honest. And the game was over as a cup tie once the second goal went in. And to challenge them with what we had available would have been, it made it even more difficult. I think if we'd been full strength and had the Trippiers, Livramentos, Joe Lintons, Tonali's, then we could have given them a game. It's a one-off game, a cup tie. But to sustain a full league challenge against a team like Man City is going to take at least another 4 windows and a bigger checkbook than we've been allowed to use.
We'll do the ads about 10 to, because I know Stu's got to get off then. Do the professionals think that Newcastle will make a positive statement to improve the fan base morale during the international break? For example, sponsors or ground news, Mitch. Newcastle have been wanting to do that, haven't they? They've often made statements during that period.
Would be a wonderful time to do it during that sort of interim period. I think any kind of morale boost would be welcome. That's for sure. Even if it stops people stressing about things that haven't even happened yet and might not happen, and starts to get, we're discussing positives. How so many people have jumped on Bruno's comment on social media to say that he's definitely leaving. I mean, that's stunning. That's pessimism and defeatism of the highest level. He doesn't take the social media very often to make comments, and it's usually reactive, and it's usually when it's with passion. So I don't interpret that as that way at all. I don't see personally how you can. Radio silence would worry me more. Mm-hmm. And radio silence from the club during this period, it doesn't make me comfortable. There's so many things that still need sorting out at fundamental levels. I've got 2 more concerning tales about tickets not working with people who had access difficulties and needed disabled access, and having tickets, with one being stranded and another where a husband's ticket was flashed up red and she had to be left at the turnstile while he tried to get his ticket sorted out.
Crutches. On a crutches, yeah.
Yeah, it's that's wrong. And that's a monumental fuck up, that.
I would advise anybody who has an issue, though, not to take to social media and call the club CUNTSs. I genuinely can understand frustration, but
I can understand frustration. It's got to be done direct with supporter services, and I think a point made strongly and professionally directly to them will be taken far better. Yeah,
and that wasn't a criticism of the guy. I just genuinely
no.
Listen. It's not. I haven't been in that position, and what he's been through is clearly very distressing. But the problem he has now is that the way the club react with social media now, the chances are he could be banned from the club. We know what they're like.
There's that one, and I'm trying to get more info on. It's seemingly somebody who was left with a mobility scooter, whose ticket flashed up red and was told, "Well, there's no more spaces." So I don't know how that got resolved, and that sounds like 2 different incidents. I find mind-blowing. We seem to be finding ways to score own goals every week with certain things. And so I think something coming from the club over this break that'll put a little bit of a spring in everybody's step would be fabulous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, Jules says no need to use language like that, full stop, in my opinion. And of course, we've just heard Darren Eales come out this week and say that there's going to be a crackdown on anyone using that kind of language or abuse. Our staff won't take abuse. So, it's the heat of the moment stuff. It doesn't make it right. It's not excusable. But at the same time, some of the problems that are being created for our fan base are being created by the club. And that's the problem that we're seeing. And I constantly see the supporters club to be honest, coming out and saying lots of things. Newcastle United Supporters Club coming out and saying this needs to be addressed, that needs to be addressed. But of course, the club won't speak to the Supporters Club because they're not recognised as they're not a recognised part of the FAB. I always think of Thunderbirds when I say that. But yeah, it would be nice to have something positive over the international break. Something to come out to Stu. I mean, there is a bit of negativity around, and it's going to happen. We knew it would happen this season. So did the club. But it would be nice if they came out with something. I have a feeling, though, it could be something like a contract extension for a player that probably people probably groan and moan about. But, just something positive would be good.
But would, as I said last week's show, that I believe that Joe Linton's close to being announced, and I think that would be a big boost to the fan base.
Good shout.
So like that, yeah, he's signed. Because you see in the pictures of him last week when he was waiting for the team coming off against Wolves, or was that the week before? So he's in part of it. If he was thinking he wasn't going to be there, he wouldn't be welcoming his friends and his mates off the pitch, would he? He'd just be sitting sulking or not even being at the game. So that would be a good thing. And it's nice that we're talking about the possibility, and it's likely that positive news will be announced, because under the Ashley regime, he always used the international windows to give out bad news, whether it be stadium name changes or different sponsorships and things like that. So we're a different beast, we're a different animal. We're just not allowed to express how we wanted to at the moment. But a nice little contract announcement for Joe Linton, which I thought would have been this past week. So if it comes next week, then fine. But it will happen. And what other good news can they have? I think they'll be holding sponsors back till the end of the tax year. They'll get through this one, unless once they do the books, they'll look and think, right, we might need to put one in for the rolling 3-year thing. But by the way they look at it with the new rulings, I think they want to attack with as much might as possible. With how much money you generate, and by putting some into this year instead of having it into next year will obviously have a detrimental effect on how we can sign. But it would be nice. Another bit of good news that would make everyone smile is Man United cough up the 20 million. You know what I mean? Or at least they paid 15, because then if you amortize that, it's going to give us enough money to sign a decent player. And as I've joked previously, it'd be nice to see that's the Dan Ashworth signing. So that would be great. A quality right winger, quality left back, and then we can call up the Dan Ashworth sign and then keep the money for the summer for what they want to do. But yeah, good news is always nice to have. But what you'll find is people thrive on bad news, not on good news. The good news is expected, and it's just what he should be saying, or they should be doing that. There's too many cynical people out there where sometimes we need to appreciate what we actually have got, the position we're in, and frustratingly where the owners want to be, and at the moment being hampered. But that'll make them more determined. Trust me, that'll make them more determined to get us to where we want to be.
Okay, lots of questions coming in. It's a shorter show, so we're not going to get all of these questions asked. Sorry about that, everybody. Alan Blaylock will just take a turn to a different direction. He says, do you think Lee Clark's son would have broken into our first team? My view is no way yet. He's a Liverpool star now. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We've seen a bit of an interview that Lee Clark had given on a podcast this week, saying that the dream move for him would be for Lee Clark to come back to Lee Clark's son to come back to Newcastle, his son to come back to Newcastle. But if Bobby came back, it would be a Shearer-esque fee to get him here. But do you think he could have broken through, couldn't he? I mean, there was nothing saying he couldn't. It was just he broke through at the wrong time, Mitch.
Yeah, he come through at a time when there was no obvious pathway for someone to come through under Ashley's ownership. I don't see that there was any incentive for him to stay. But somebody as organised as Liverpool's academy is, with a plan to develop them, with a pathway, and they use their youngsters a lot in cup competitions. And again, their injury situation meant that he got more opportunities than he probably would have otherwise by now. It's always very difficult to look back at the decision like that and say ifs and ands, and what or maybe, but he was certainly very highly rated when he was at Newcastle United. You know, there was a lot of talk about him, especially when you went away with English age groups. Mm-hmm. That, you know, you always come back from the English age groups with a lot of praise. And he was certainly a hot enough commodity for Liverpool to take a chance to invest in him. So it's disappointing, but that's, again, another thing that we need to see to be fixed by PIF in particular about academies. It's why they are investing in young talent and invested in bringing young players in to make up the gap, because we haven't been developing our own very well. And so, for me, we've got to learn more lessons from that. That's what we've got to do. Sadly, Bobby's gone, and he might come back, but I doubt it. So we can't dwell on that, but what we've got to do is learn the lessons.
Yeah, Stu, I would agree with what Mitch says there. Would you?
Definitely. The thing is, it's one of those, like, if my auntie had a pair of steel toe caps, should be my uncle. So we can't change the past, but Mitch is bang on the money there when he says it's how we alter the future. And we've seen too many good players slip through. But personally, I haven't seen enough of young Bobby Clark to say whether we made a huge mistake or not. And if he stayed, would he have been given the pathway? Not under the previous regime, he wouldn't, if you looked how the Sean Longstaff was treated. So we can't keep harping on thinking, oh, well, if this or if that. What we can do is be in control of our own futures and have a system in place where the quality in the youth team can and will make an impact. And I think maybe because of the injuries this season, that's been allowed to flourish. You know, unfortunately, Allison did get injured, but he had broke into the first team squad last year. And obviously, Miley, until he got flogged to death, he was, you can see he's going to be a good player. And he looked good again, as I said earlier, when he came on yesterday. So we've got players who are coming through. They've signed some good young players as well. Now, whether that's just to sell them on at a higher fee, because that's what other clubs do as well. But there's one thing that Mitch has said on a couple of occasions is, if we want to be a big club, we have to start thinking and acting like big clubs as well. And little things like, oh, that player's gone. I mean, the Chelsea moan that they lost Salah and De Bruyne for low fees. You know, they just went out and bought other players. You know, we can't predict the future, but what we can do is do as much as we can to control the present, which makes the future better. And the Bobby Clarks hopefully will be the last talent that leaves Tyneside unnecessarily, or because he didn't feel like he was getting the right treatment, or the academy's not good enough, or the management wasn't good enough, or he didn't think he's ever going to get into the team. You know, so where hopefully now the kids won't have to go elsewhere. They'll want to stay because they believe they can get through it.
Yeah. Jules says, what's more concerning about this now attitude on some channels' accounts is it's aggressive. The tone is far from constructive criticism and more personal attacks whip some into a frenzy. I think you're right there. Lots of people saying that Lewis Hall made Eddie look daft last night. Davey Swayze is in the chat saying that. Yeah, a couple of other questions. I love this from Alan, by the way. City are a beautiful, beautiful tapestry which has taken a couple of decades to put together. At this moment in time, we are a jigsaw with pieces missing and broken. Gradually, those pieces will come together. Away the lads. Great way of putting it, that, Alan. Very nice, mate. And yeah, TV coverage, Stephen. Got to agree. Is it just me or the standard of TV coverage gone down? The number of times the camera's panned onto a City player rather than what is happening live, or not re-examining fouls against us. Stephen, it's not just you. There's a tendency as well to go into the crowd, you know, focusing on who's sitting watching the match. Absolutely crazy, mate. It is bonkers. And Jonathan, well, maybe ask, you know, I don't think he's lost the dressing room at all. So-called fan channel saying Eddie's lost the dressing room. Do you agree? Definitely not. There's no way in the world. And if Jeff Hendricks signs a 5-year new deal, Ian, you'll be having a nightmare, mate, because that's never going to happen. So don't worry yourself about that. Blue Rhythm Boy asked this question. He says, I know this sounds bitter, but would Man City be the same team if they hadn't cooked the books? Allegedly. If no, then can we actually get there? Again, one for another day, that Blue Rhythm Boy, because, you know, financial stuff. etc. And I'm glad he said allegedly, which I've reiterated. But yeah, I mean, can we get there one day? I think if you listen to Stu and Mitch, the answer is yes, but it will take time. And I think
on that point though, it is twofold. That the way that the rules have been structured, particularly post Man City, means we haven't been able to take advantage of some of the things that they definitely did take advantage of. If you add to that the question mark about have they done a degree of financial doping, and that's what the 117 charges are there to be investigated and discussed down the line. The charges are there for a reason. Does that therefore push things forward? Of course it does. Of course it does. And so, yes, they've given themselves a helping hand. Even if you don't accuse them of financial doping, because there were certain loopholes and things they could take advantage of, they've maximised what they could do in the first bit in a way we never could, because there was already rules coming into place on the back of what they did. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. You're absolutely right. It's one for another day, if it ever goes to court.
If it ever goes to court, yeah. Well, of course, we'll find out tomorrow. Everton and Forest, what fate befalls them? Because the latest news will be coming out about that. I want to cram this in before Stu has to go in 3 minutes. Shearer mentioned 4 or 5 players who dropped off this season. Who was he referring to? Botman, Byrne, Longstaff, Almiron. Who else? Yeah, it was an interesting quote that by Shearer. I mean, I think he's stating the bleeding obvious. Like Stu, I'll come to you first because I know you've got to jump off. But I think there's quite a few players, and he's not going to pick them out. But Botman, I think, with injury. Byrne, he's a year older. He's been caught out with the injuries in the formation. We won't change the formation. Longstaff's playing with a bad foot. Almiron, he has dropped off, but he probably reached his peak last season. But there's a few, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I watched Shearer's podcast, so possibly he watches ours, because that's what we said last week, that some people had peaked and it was the right time to sell them. And the names that were mentioned, we can't disagree with. There's no point in repeating them again and again. But as far as I'm concerned, when they pull on a black and white shirt, then I'll support them. Do I want better players in their shirt? Yes. But until then, we're just going round in circles, aren't we? But I do agree that there is players that's, I wouldn't say for their want to trying. It's down to the actual ability. And again, this just goes to what we just said there. We have to start thinking like a big club, and we can't be loyal to certain players. Alex Ferguson always knew when to get rid of a player. Wenger always knew when to get rid of a player. Bobby Robson, Kevin Keegan, they always knew when the time was right to get rid of a player. And the fans might not agree with it, but they knew what was going on, and they can see it's their job to strengthen when you're in the position to. And that's always easier rather than chasing. And that's why I keep going back to this summer. It's how we finish the season is going to be crucial for our near-term future, not so much long-term, but near-term, because if we're in Europe again, then it shows a level of consistency, and you can even sell the injuries as a reason why we only finished 7th or 8th or 6th. Whereas, and add that to the Champions League finish before, the whole of Europe's seen how we could have done better. Well, if we'd been official better, we would have been in the last 16. So that there's so much things positive that can come out of how we finish this season. In regarding what Alan Shearer said, yeah, it is stating the obvious. We've all seen those who have dipped, but maybe they haven't dipped. Maybe they've just reverted to type, and they got carried away at the crest of a wave last season, like everyone else did. So let's just go out and hopefully they come back from Dubai and they get the first game on the board, which will be West Ham. That's one of the teams in our little mini league, and they just blast them off the park. They have a performance like they did against Tottenham last year, where they just blitz them, and that's the sort of game that we need against a team that's, because remember Tottenham were challenging us for the Champions League when we did that to them. That's the type of performance that we need, and if we do deliver that, that'll carry us through the rest of the season, and then we'll finish in Europe again.
I will say as well, Miggy obviously was surplus to requirements in January, and I do think that will have affected him. He's got a very happy demeanour, but the club were ready to sell him. They wanted to sell him, and they wanted to sell him to Saudi, and he didn't want to go to Saudi. We know that, we know that's a fact. And from our perspective, how would we cope if we knew that our employers didn't want us anymore? You've got to put that into mind. He's done well.
If I was getting double a pay rise, I wouldn't be too bothered, to be honest.
Yeah, I would have gone for the money, definitely. Yeah, Mitch. What else?
I'm gonna have to go, Steve.
Take care, mate. See you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Thanks, Nick.
You.
So yeah, what would you say to what Shearer said? He is stating the obvious there with those players.
He's just stating the obvious. There's no need to name the names. I would say it's probably more than the number he mentioned as well. Between loss of form, struggling with injuries and recovery, and not having the same impact as they did last season, there's a number of players can look at themselves for this season and say, yeah, I've not performed to the same level. I think everybody expected a bit of a drop-off. I think we've had a much bigger drop-off than probably what we were thinking we would see. I think everybody's underestimated the impact of the intensity of playing in the Champions League. And that's one of the biggest lessons we have to learn going forward. My hope is that Eddie's left is supported properly in the summer and left to build on that with the experiences of this season under his belt. And because I think that, to me, is the sensible growth that we want to see. And I think Stephen's right there. I think the pecking order will change with introductions. We made signings really that gave that squad more depth for this season, and it hasn't come to fruition because the two of the main ones, one's suspended and one had a curious foot injury that you don't often get in football and ended up out for bloody months. Yeah. I think what they'll be looking to do this summer is to improve the options at the first choice level from 13 or 14 players up to 16 or 17. And then that automatically has a knock-on effect that you get strength in depth from players that have already been there, done it and got a T-shirt, but maybe can't do it week in, week out anymore. And I think that's what we've got to be looking at doing. Sensible additions. In an ideal world, the squad needs a big overhaul. But it's not an ideal world and we don't have the wiggle room on FFP. So we've got to sort of dampen that a little bit. But I think we'll have more wiggle room than people realise. And I've got a feeling that that was the strategy of taking the risk in January of not to invest, to make sure everything's in place for what we really need to do over the summer.
Question for you, Mitch, to finish off with from John. He says, this might be for Mitch. Back in the day, it was cortisone injections that were used before games, and it was reckoned players had future problems as a result. Is there a modern drug now used, which means future difficulties are negligible?
No, all the old-fashioned idea of having injections to play was about masking pain and inflammation, and it didn't do anything to correct the damage being done underlying. So when you're playing through the pain barrier with injections, you think about somebody like Paul McGrath, and why he drank so much was because of the severe level of pain he was in with his knees when he wasn't playing football and wasn't being injected. Was one of the few ways you could get that pain out of his head was to get pissed. So, that's a reality. Are there modern ways of doing it? Yes, but essentially it's still the same thing. The surgical techniques are improving. Something that's creeping into medicine all around, but particularly sports medicine, are regenerative techniques, stem cells and PRP and PRF and things like that, which are phenomenally amazing things, which help heal in no end, which is why the Jets got Rodgers close to playing again at the end of the season after doing an Achilles, which is almost unheard of. But there's still most of the things that are given to players, though, asking them to play on through an injury, are really only masking the pain and the inflammation. They're not addressing the problem. And many problems need proper rest, proper surgical intervention, and proper treatment with regenerative techniques, etc. And yes, the surgical techniques are better, so the recovery time is better, and players aren't out as long. But essentially, whenever you're using any kind of injection to get a player through a game, you're potentially putting harm in their way for the future. And why so many players end up with knackered bodies at the end of their careers. And why, for example, even more recently, you take Michael Owen, who had so many games of football under his belt by his 30s, when we were cursed with him in our squad. I know somebody at the Nuffield who was involved in the scan on his hamstrings, and the comment from one of the physicians was he had the hamstrings of a 70-year-old because they'd been damaged so much and been used so hard, which I can very well believe. So all injections ever really do is cover it, and that's why so many former players struggle.
Good stuff. Always good to get a medical perspective. I've got a couple of other questions. I'll squeeze these in because I saved them. Another podcast showed from our away end, tons of empty seats in the home end. When your team wins all the time, does success bring tourists, and do we want that? Thoughts, lads? Inevitably, and it's a short answer to that. That's where we're heading. Yeah. If we want to be successful, we're going to have more corporate areas. We'll have a bigger stadium, or we'll have a new stadium, and unfortunately, that's where we'll end up. Yeah,
it's the opposite edge of a sword that cuts both ways. You talk to some of the long-term City fans who are loving it, but equally, why they don't always turn up at, say, a semi-final at Wembley is because the guys who are at the bottom end of the income scale amongst the fan base have to pick and choose which games to go to.
Exactly.
They can't afford to do all of them. And we will have that same problem. However, we have a core fan base at the minute that already feels a little disenfranchised by some of the things that's been done already. And again, it's not going to be the things that are done. It's going to be the way they're done. Very much an Ashley thing. And that's what I think we've got to look at dealing with over the next couple of years.
Yeah, last one. We'll do this quick fire. Stephen Kennedy says, can't be controversial. Can I be controversial? Isak's a luxury player. Great when he has the ball. Without the ball, he just stands around watching the player pass by him. He needs to be chasing and harrying. I don't know if he's a luxury player. He scored 16 goals this season. He should have scored 2 goals yesterday. It would have got us to penalties and would have, took a chance. But he is what he is. He's an exceptionally good finisher, though, isn't he?
I don't think he's fully fit, mate.
No.
I think we're still at his season. I think he's still not quite right with his groin. And I think you'll see when he's on his game, you can't say that Isaac that went to Everton a couple of seasons ago and danced down the wing and put 7 of them on their arse and set up a goal was standing around with his finger in his backside doing out. That's Isaac when he's fully fit and he's on form.
True.
He's been also this season really isolated.
Yeah.
At times. He's been an island. And if rumours are true that Eddie's asked them to back off the hard press to make it a little softer, what else can he do? But that's my take on it. I'm not convinced he's fully fit.
I agree with you. Time has beaten us this morning. Thank you to Stu for coming on under the circumstances he finds himself in. And thanks to Mitch, as always. Thanks to you. Thanks to the moderators. Good to see so many of you in the chat this morning, and hopefully giving you a bit more of a calmer perspective on events over the course of the last Newcastle United weekend. I'll be back with the fans forum, 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'll play out with the ads. Take care, Mitch.
Cheers, everyone.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Go to their website, skipsandbins.com. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. Go to their website, unitedgrouptravel.com. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com or phone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. They're a local company from Morpeth, and there are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under the video. Click the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your social media. If you want to help the channel financially, you can pay a one-off £25 fee. You get a cup, a scarf, a pen and a membership card and entry into the NUFC Matters monthly draw. Email john@nufcmatters.com for more details, or if you've got a smartphone, scan the QR code now and it takes you straight to the membership pack. We also support the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you'll find the matchday bucket. You can make a donation virtually today. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. We also do events during the year. NUFC Matters Live will be at the O2 City Hall on Friday the 2nd of August for an evening with Rob Lee, one night in Antwerp. Tickets start at £15 and you can get them from ticketmaster.co.uk. An evening with the entertainers takes place on Friday the 24th of January 2025 at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House in Newcastle. Telephone 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk to buy tickets today. You can also catch me on the North East Footy Breakfast Show live on Toon Radio weekdays 7 till 9 a.m. on DAB, smart speakers and the toonuk.com.